comparative, cheaper, more expensive, etc. Look at these examples. How should we get there? Should we drive or take the train? Let's drive. It's cheaper. Don't go by train. It's more expensive. Cheaper and more expensive are comparative forms. After comparatives, you can use than. It's cheaper to drive than go by train. Going by train is more expensive than driving. The comparative forms is ear or more. We use er for short words, one syllable. One syllable. Cheap, cheaper. Faster, faster. Roger. Thin, thinner. We also use ear for two-syllable words that end in y. Y, ear. Lucky, luckier. Early, earlier. Easier. Pretty, prettier. For spelling, see Appendix 6. We use more for longer words. Two syllable or more. Two syllables or more. More serious, more expensive, more often, more comfortable. We also use more for adverbs that end in ly. More slowly, more seriously, more easily, more quietly. Compare these examples. You are older than me. The exam is quite easy, easier than I expected. Can you walk a little faster? I'd like to have a bigger car. Last night I went to bed earlier than usual. You are more patient than me. The exam was quite difficult, more difficult than I expected. Can you walk a bit more slowly? I'd like to have a more reliable car. Reliable. I'd like to have a more reliable car. I don't play tennis much these days. I used to play more often. We use both ear or more with some two-syllable adjectives especially. Adjective. Adjectives especially. We use both ear or more with some two-syllable adjectives, especially. Clever, narrow, quiet, shallow, simple. Clever, narrow, quiet, shallow, simple. Shallow. It's too noisy here. Can you go somewhere quieter, or can you go somewhere more quiet? A few adjectives and adverbs have irregular comparative forms. Irregular comparative forms. A few adjectives and adverbs have irregular comparative forms. Good or better? The yard looks better since you cleaned it up. I know him well, probably better than anyone else knows him. Badly. Worse. How's your headache? Better? No, it's worse. He did very badly on the exam. He did very badly on the exam. Worse than expected. Father, or father, father, farther, farther,
farther,
farther,
farther,
farther, farther,
further,
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 further, far, farther, further. It's a long walk from here to the park. Farther than I thought, or farther than I thought. Not that farther, but not farther. Not that farther also means more or additional. More and or more or additional. Let me know if you hear any further news. Any more news. Any further news. Comparative. 틀릴 것 같은데. Complete the sentences using a comparative form. Order more important, etc. This restaurant is very expensive. Let's go somewhere cheaper. This coffee is weak. This coffee is very weak. I like very weak. I like thicker. Thicker. Weak. Stronger. I like stronger. The town was surprisingly big. I expected it to be smaller. The hotel was surprisingly cheap. I expected it to be more expensive. The weather is too cold here. I'd like to live somewhere warmer. Sometimes my job is a bit boring. I'd like to do something more interesting. Or more fun. It's too bad you live so far away. I wish you lived closer. It was quite easy to find a place to live. I thought it would be harder. Your work isn't very good. I'm sure you can't do worse. Your work isn't very good. I'm sure you can't do worse. I'm sure you can do worse. Don't worry, the situation isn't so bad. It could be better. You hardly ever call me. Why don't you call me? It's easier. Why don't you call me more often? You're too close to the camera. Can you move a little farther away? Complete the sentences. Use the comparative forms or of the words in the box. Use them where necessary. I was feeling tired last night, so I went to bed earlier than usual. I'd like to have a more reliable car. The one I have keeps breaking down. Unfortunately, the problem was without efforts. More serious without effort. You look thinner. Have you lost weight? We don't have enough space here. We need a bigger apartment. James doesn't study very hard. He's doesn't study very hard. He's more peaceful and having a good time. Health and happiness are more important than money. 어머, 됐네, 다 안 썼구나. I like living in the country. It's more higher. It's higher living in a city. Higher? 이게 peaceful인데. It's more peaceful than living in a city. It's more interested than in having a good time. I'm sorry, I don't understand. Can you speak more slowly, please? In some parts of the country, prices are higher in others. Higher than in others. Complete the sentences. Choose from. Getting a visa was complicated. It took longer than I expected. Sorry about my mistake. I will try and be more careful in future. More better. I will try and be more careful in future. Your English has improved. It's better than it was. You can take the bus or the train. The buses are more faster. More words. Quietly, frequent. Frequent. You can't always have things immediately. You have to be quietly more patient. I'm pessimist. I always think things are going to get worse. Pessimist. You are busier than usual in the office today. It's not usually so busy. You're talking very loudly. Can you speak more quietly? Lead the situations and complete the sentences. Use a comparative form, or more. Yesterday the temperature was 6 degrees. Today it's only 3 degrees. It's colder today than it was yesterday. Dan and I went for a run. I ran 10 miles, then stopped after 8 miles. I ran 2 miles more. 2 miles more than I ran 2 miles more than then. The trip takes 4 hours by car and 5 hours by train. The trip takes training 5 hours, 4 hours. The trip takes 1 more hour. By train than by car. Colder. Further. I expected my friends to arrive at about 4. In fact, they arrived at 2:30. My friends arrived earlier than I expected. There is always a lot of traffic here, but today the traffic is really bad. The traffic today is much worse than usual. It took longer to take these exercises than usual. Yeah, it took longer to take these exercises than usual. It took longer to take these exercises than usual. So let's get started to check it. Stronger. The coffee is very weak. I like it stronger. The town was surprisingly big. I expected it to be smaller. The hotel was surprisingly cheap. I expected it to be more expensive. The weather is too cold here. I'd like to live somewhere warmer or hotter. Sometimes my job is a bit boring. I'd like to do something more interesting or more exciting. It's too bad you live so far away. I wish you lived closer or nearer. Don't worry, the situation isn't so bad. It could be better. Nearer, better. 8번. It was quite easy to find a place to live. I thought it would be harder. More difficult. More complicated. More complicated. Your work isn't very good. I'm sure you can do worse. I'm sure you can be better. Don't worry, the situation isn't so bad. Isn't so bad. 그것이란 뜻이죠. It could be better. It could be worse. Isn't so bad. It could be worse. You hardly ever call me. Why don't you call me more often? You're too close to the camera. Can you move a little farther away? Farther도 된다. Your work isn't very good. I'm sure you can do better. Don't worry. The situation isn't so bad. It could be worse. 나빠질 수도 있었어. Don't worry, the situation isn't so bad. It could be worse. I was feeling tired last night, so I went to bed earlier than usual. Unfortunately, the problem was more serious than we thought at first. You look thinner than before. You look thinner. Have you lost weight? We don't have enough space here. We need a bigger. We need a bigger apartment. James doesn't study very hard. He's more interested than in having a good time. More interested. He's interested in having a good time. Health and happiness are more important than money. I like living in the country. It's more peaceful than living in a home. I'm sorry, I don't understand. Can you speak more slowly, please? In some parts of the country, prices are higher than in others. Sorry about my mistake. I'll try and be more careful in future. Careful. Your English has improved. It's better than it was. It's better than it was. You can't take the bus or the train. The buses are more frequent than the trains. Frequent. You can't always have things immediately. You have to be more patient. More patient. You can always have things immediately. You can always have things immediately. You have to be more patient. I'm a pessimist. Pessimist.
Pessimist.
I'm a pessimist.
Pessimist.
I always think things are going to get worse. Things are going to get worse. Things are going to get worse. We were busier than usual in the office today. It's not usually so busy. Then, you're talking very loudly. Can you speak more quietly? Dan and I went for a run. I ran 10 miles, then stopped after 8 miles. I ran 2 miles more than Dan. I ran further than Dan. The trip takes 4 hours by car and 5 hours by train. The trip takes longer by train than by car. Takes longer by train than by car. I expected my friends so 앉는다. I expected my friends to arrive at about 4. In fact, they arrived at 2:30. My friends arrived earlier than I expected. My friends arrived earlier than I expected. There is always a lot of traffic here, but today the traffic is really bad. The traffic today is much worse than usual. Happy. Traffic is really bad and heavy, and there is always a lot of traffic.